Hello, friends. Andrea with the Bangs here. And about a month ago, I read an article called Orphans and Their Quests. And I was able to set up a chat with the author. His name is Manvir Singh. He is a PhD student at Harvard studying cognitive and evolutionary anthropology. Basically, we just talk about stories. The initial premise of the article is why are orphans so often the protagonists of stories? And we go into speaking about tragedy versus, say, comedy, or the sympathetic story, as he calls it. And yes, it's a very interesting talk. I love stories, and this really helped to enrich my understanding of what stories mean to humans. So I hope you guys like it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. So, okay, can we start off about what you do, like what you're doing your PhD in?
Yeah, so I am doing my PhD
Oh, wait,
on.
we should do your name.
Oh yeah, my name is Manvir. Yeah, so the like specific project that my PhD is on is why do societies everywhere reliably give rise to shamanism and beliefs about witches? So the aim piece is not. I mean, it's a part of this broader project of trying to understand like the patterns in complex culture, but it's obviously distinct from shamans and witches.
Right. Oh, because I for background, I like two people watching. I specifically read an article of yours and really liked it and wanted to talk to you about it. But so that is your specifically what you're covering in your PhD. But it does, like, kind of like you said, there's kind of umbrella kind of over it. So the article I'm talking about is something about orphans. I don't remember the name of it. What's the name of it?
I think it's called Orphans and Their Quests.
Oh, that's great. That's a great
Yeah,
title.
my title was The Stories We Tell, which presumably they thought was lame and replaced with.
You know, that's kind of nice, actually. Like, that one's nice, but I mean the other one sounds a little more epic, right?
It does.
Yeah, but why are orphans so sympathetic? And I know that sounds kind of like, well, of course it's sad, that's why. But can you explain?
Yeah, well, okay. So like obviously I am just trying to explain it. This might not be why orphans are so sympathetic. But yeah, so
They
like,
show up a lot, though.
they're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, I was recently in a museum in China, and there was a mural on the wall, and the person was like, "This is a mural of this famous Chinese tale, which I've unfortunately forgotten." And then they went through it, and it was a love story. It had a protagonist, and they faced off against an maybe they didn't have an antagonist. I think they were like trying to pursue love. Um, but just kind of as a joke for my partner, I was like, was this guy an orphan? And the person was like, yes, of course. But I only that, that like stories very frequently star orphans, so much so that you can almost like use it as like a baseline or something that you would expect.
It would be weird if they weren't.
Yeah, or like, and I guess in some cases they aren't, but it's strange if they're not even like bullied or picked on, or like, if they don't grow up in a place. For example, like a lot of TV shows that I remember from my childhood, maybe not so many, but at least Doug starts with Doug moving to a totally new place and like being in a total new school. It's this analog to being an orphan where you're just in a difficult situation that is out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're a youngest sibling. Sometimes they might have been abandoned by their parents, like Rey in this new Star Wars series. Like,
Right.
she may not technically be an orphan, but the point that I was just trying to make was that orphans are super common, and in those cases, when a protagonist is not an orphan, they're often abandoned or a youngest sibling, or they're in a new place. They're just starting off in circumstances that are out of their control, and put them in like relative disadvantage.
Right. So why? So okay, so that kind of leads me to ask about, and I don't know, there's two questions, and I'm not sure which direction to go because they both need to be covered. So let me know which one you want to answer. So that's one theme of many other, I guess, plot points or plot devices in stories around the world. So you kind of you call it the sympathetic plot device, and it's sort of like your own universalizing, like the hero's journey kind of thing, right? Is that correct or no?
Right. It's like a general version of the hero's journey.
Right. Yeah, even more bare bones, even more general. Okay. So how is it that I don't even know if there's an answer. How do we have like the same stories around the world?
Yeah. So that's the
right.
Yeah, that's the question.
I know, that's why I'm like, is there an answer? Like,
well, okay, yeah. So in the Aeon piece, I try to spell out an answer. But just to like quickly step back, just to like define what the sympathetic plot involves.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
often like,
that's where I was going to ask you, what is that? And then I had the other question that I really wanted to get to. But let's explain first, what that is.
Yeah, so the sympathetic plot, the way that I think about it is there are like the primary features.
Mm-hmm.
That's the core. That's what all of them share. And then there are the secondary features that like they often have. Okay. So the primary features are you have a protagonist, they have a goal, there is an obstacle between them and their goal.
Okay.
They eventually overcome that obstacle, and then they reap rewards.
Right.
Okay. And then, so the things that you often find like bunched up or added onto that are the protagonist starts out in misfortune, so they're often an orphan, a youngest sibling, whatever.
Those poor youngest siblings.
Yeah, so the youngest sibling, I don't know, that is maybe not tremendously common in the West, or as common as it is, for example, in some other like folkloric traditions.
Well, there is though. In I have a degree in Christian history, and so I know like an amount about like biblical stories. So I mean, there's a lot of sort of that sort of role reversal of the youngest brother usurping the oldest brother in Israel, and literally with Jacob and Esau.
Yeah. Okay, so they often start out in misfortune or in kind of a circumstance that's out of their control. They're often likable, so they are good at things. They're strong, they're fast, they're funny.
Yeah.
And they are like kind or generous or nice.
I love that you have to say these though. Like you have to explain that they're likable, because we don't think, oh, that's a likable protagonist. Like it just connects. And it's hard to name the things, right? So you're kind of like breaking it down so that, oh, that's why I liked so and so. That's why I like, know. So anyway, sorry, please continue. I'm going to stop interrupting you.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, so, and like an interesting thing, just in coming back to this likable thing, sometimes they're like huge jerks, or they're, just atrocious or repulsive in some kind of way.
Yeah.
But they'll often compensate with like, maybe they're like a jackass to some people, but they're like really good looking and like quite strong or something.
So there's something that kind of makes up for it.
At least I would say when they are when it's like exhibits all of the other features that we're talking about. They confront an obstacle, they overcome it, they get rewards, and that's how it ends.
Can you give an example of someone who's like kind of a jerk, but like it makes up for it in another way?
Okay, let me think.
There are so many, but I want to hear one that you think.
This isn't the best example, but like Dexter from that show.
Oh, from the show Dexter. Yeah, right. Yeah, we like him.
Yeah, but he's constructed in such a way that he kills people, but you root for him. You never want him to get caught. I admittedly haven't seen it in many years, but I remember him being a murderer that is like quite sympathetic, that you root for. And he's also handsome. He's like very kind to his partner, and
Right.
he to kill people who are otherwise repulsive, or
Yeah. So he
demonic.
gets a pass. Yeah.
Pass. Or like House. House
Right.
is a jerk.
Yes.
He's also like sharp, and I haven't seen the show again enough, but I would guess that there are points in which like some kind of sincerity or appealingness is demonstrated.
I'm thinking also like, well, I know House is like based on Sherlock Holmes. So like Sherlock Holmes as well, like the Benedict Cumberbatch one. You're like,
Right.
he's such a jerk, but you're like, oh, but he's our jerk.
Yeah, he's astute. He's like funny. Yeah.
So you give these descriptions of these types of things that are in a protagonist. So in your
Right. Yeah. So these
plot.
are secondary features. These are the things that not all of them necessarily exhibit, but they're common.
Okay. And
So
is this around the world?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're likable. They confront an opponent who's repulsive and who's like mean and often intimidating. They'll go on a journey, so they'll leave some spot and they'll like encounter a series of obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And like anyone who tries to stifle them or block them often is punished in the end. Anyone who like faces off against them, they're either punished or they might be redeemed,
Right.
or not redeemed, but like change their mind,
Right.
and undergo some kind of repent. They might repent.
Oh, okay. Oh, so there's a chance. Okay.
Yeah, or at least for people who are like mean to them.
Right.
Anyway, so this is this common structure. A likable protagonist who starts out in a crappy circumstance has a goal. In trying to achieve their goal, they're stopped by an opponent who's often mean and repulsive and ugly, or has some kind of very negative quality.
Mm-hmm.
They overcome. They reap rewards.
Right.
So then the question, and just to like come back to your point, like this is something you find all over. You find it in the folktales of West Africa. You find it in the folktales of the Inuit. You find it in Russian fairy tales. You find it in like the hero myths of
the ancient
like,
Greece and Rome and like all those Babylon and
studying every culture one by one. Maybe not. There hasn't actually been like an exhaustive systematic thing that has tested whether you find this everywhere, but it seems to be super recurrent. To really emerge when people tell stories.
Right. So how are they all present? All these things.
Right. Yeah. So that's the tricky question. That's the question. The thing that I argued in this Aeon piece and have argued also or I'm starting to argue in like the academic literature, is that the sympathetic plot is essentially like a technology for entertainment. It's like this. It's this package of features that is highly effective at like tickling our mind.
Right.
To the way that the human psychology is constructed in such a way that it is highly pleasing and entertaining.
Okay.
And so the argument is that it does that in two ways, or there are two main things that it's doing. So first, it is like getting us interested. It's drawing us in by very simply telling us about someone who wants something but has difficulty getting it.
I was just thinking like the conflict, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Obstacle. Like there is something, humans are so, one of the most effective ways to get another human's attention is to tell them about someone who wants something but is having trouble getting it. So like I can be like,
so simple.
So simple. It's so simple, and yet it's so the word that came to mind, which is wrong, but was intoxicating. But it's just so like gravitating.
Right. It grabs our attention. That's why you grab someone's attention by being like, oh, what? Do they have trouble with something that they want?
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is like it even works when you know that the person ultimately overcame it. So
right, I did read about this in your article, so you can explain it.
Yeah, so there was this cool study that this person had done, I think in 1988 or 1989. This psychologist Richard Gehrig where he essentially gave students like events that are very familiar. For example, George Washington became the first president.
Mm-hmm.
Remind them, don't forget that George Washington became the first president. And then you start to tell them the series of events. George Washington ended the war, whatever, ended the revolution. He was the general in the Revolutionary War. And if you introduce some kind of obstacle, he found that it enhanced this feeling of suspense. So if he, for example, said, George Washington finished the Revolutionary War, but afterwards he was very tired and John Adams was trying to elbow his way in. Then people are like, oh, wait, what? What happened?
Yeah. It puts like almost like a human element to the name, the guy on the dollar bill.
Yeah. I guess it does do that. That's true.
So it just made me think like, wait, that guy, he had that problem? Like John Adams also, like, you little, what are you doing? Yeah. But it's working. It makes me want to like look into it.
Yeah. So anyway, and this manifests in all different kinds of domains of entertainment. Okay. So if you think about like shows in which people are like cook-offs, we or is it Iron Chef or something?
Yeah.
Like we all have a goal of winning, and or we have a goal of finishing this thing, and you just like make it hard. You like make the ingredients really hard to find and whatever. Obviously, it's also interesting because you're like, what are they gonna make?
I was thinking about like house hunters. Like, are they gonna find the house?
Exactly.
They found
like,
it.
Even course, like an obstacle course show where it's like, are they gonna make it? Like
they do. Yeah, it almost seems a little absurd, but like, why? Okay, so that being said, like, I get it, but I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Before we get to that, imagine if like chimpanzees are sitting around watching another chimpanzee like try to find a place to sleep that night. There's something so absurd about the idea of us being.
But wait, do they do that?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah. So then again, this question is like, why are humans so intrigued, and why do they want to learn about how other humans overcome obstacles and achieve their goals?
Mm-hmm.
And so one argument is that essentially, like, our psychology is constructed to like really find that kind of information. That is very useful information.
Right.
Yeah. If there's someone else in my world who like is pursuing a goal, especially a goal that I am also pursuing, and they're having difficulty, it's like useful for me. It's adaptive for me to learn how they overcame that goal. So let's say, for example, like someone is trying to find a banana.
Okay.
Kind of a weird example. But they come back and they're like, I was looking for this banana, and I saw this banana really high up on the tree, but like I couldn't get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm someone who eats bananas. Like it's
my favorite. Yeah.
It's useful for me to know how this other person overcame the obstacle of a tall tree and ultimately got that banana. It's also useful for me to just like know the kinds of obstacles that are out there.
Right.
So for example, if someone's like, I was trying to go to the watering hole, or I was trying to like get to this other person's house.
Yeah.
And like David over there just would not allow me. He got in the way. He's like, you can't go there.
Yeah.
And that way it's also useful for me to know like what kinds of obstacles are in the world.
Right.
So anyway.
Watch out for David is all I have to say. But, okay. So we have that. Where are we? I'm trying to think of where we're at in our explaining.
Yeah. Okay.
The conflict. Okay, evolutionarily speaking, learning how others overcame obstacles could be very useful for us.
Yeah, so that's the argument. And so as a consequence of that, when we are confronted with information about another person encountering an obstacle, our psychology just like essentially motivates us to find more information and to like focus on that.
Right. Because we could use it.
Sorry?
So I said we could use it.
Exactly. But the thing with like stories is that often the information that we're getting is not actually of use to us. It's just kind of like masquerading as useful information. You know, someone is fighting a dragon, or you know, they ultimately want to save Princess Peach, and we're very intrigued. Oh my God, how are they going to do that? What are they going to do? Obviously, there's no case in my life where I'm going to face off against a dragon.
You're not going to save Princess Peach in real life? No?
Also, like, not an ideal example because it's a video game rather than a story. But obviously, right. Have stories.
Well, yeah, there's some story to it. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, like the Avengers destroying that evil guy.
Thanos,
yes.
That guy.
I mean, I'm never going to like have to figure out how to destroy Thanos, but just because my psychology is, you know, endowed by evolution with this specific kind of mechanism, I just find that kind of information interesting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and the fact we like kind of start with really big, fantastical, magic-filled stories and then kind of whittle it down to, well, what did they make on the cook-off? Like, right? Did they find the house? like that's kind of like a pretty quick, like, to literally tell that story, that show. Like, well, they were looking for a house in South Carolina, looked at 3 of them, chose one. They got it.
But I imagine that if we went to, you know, like a small-scale society, and there probably is, like, there are very few small-scale societies right now that do not have television. But if, let's say we went, you know, back in time and we went to a place where they had not yet had television or any kind of media, we just measured what they talked about, I would imagine that a good amount of the conversation, and even in my own fieldwork experience, like a good amount of the conversation is just like things that other people are doing and things that they were trying to do.
Did they find the hut? Like...
Yeah. Like, so I do fieldwork. People love to tell hunting stories.
Really?
Yeah. This monkey was up there. I'm like, how am I going to get this monkey? You know, I had the dog. We chased it.
We had the dog. Right. And I guess they wouldn't be telling you a story where they lost it. So it's like, and then we got it.
Right.
And we ate the monkey.
Right. It also has these prestige or reputational benefits.
Right. Okay, well, what about that, though? Is that part of the reason why we like usually the conflict is resolved? We like the conflict to be resolved. Is that part of like a maybe prestige building thing?
Yeah, I mean, I can see the exactly. Yeah, I can see prestige coming into it insofar as I'm telling stories about myself, and you know, I can maybe use the musical to like invite other people in, but right. I can also use the whole like experience to boost my own prestige by describing. Right. I did something that... If
you did something, but I guess if it's a story that's just like what we're talking about, like the grand sort of narratives, it's kind of like, well, I didn't do the thing. I didn't kill the Minotaur. But, so is there any other theory other than the conflict theory or the, what is the other word for conflict? Obstacles. Is there any other theory other than the obstacles/conflict theory about why all these stories are so similar?
Well, yeah. So if we think back to the features of the sympathetic plot, the obstacle only really tells us, this whole obstacle learning theory would only predict that people would confront obstacles. It doesn't tell us at all why, you know, they would be likable, why the opponents would be crappy, why they would go on journeys, why we have orphans.
Right. But wait, these are similar things that are across the world, though, what you just listed, right?
Exactly, yeah. Right, so all it is that of what we've talked about so far, the obstacle theory, it does not explain those features. Instead, I think those features can be explained by like a complementary feature of our psychology, which is this feeling of sympathetic joy, like feeling happy for someone.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and so... the argument that at least I've made is that the sympathetic plot like uses the obstacle to get people interested and to just like set up the whole structure of the story. Mm-hmm. But all the other like narrative accoutrements are about inducing sympathetic joy or about making you feel happy.
Right.
Or about, and so the argument is essentially like we seem to feel sympathetic joy when someone we want to help does well.
Right.
My kid, my really good friend, my friend comes over. I like really want my friend to do well in life, and my friend says, "Yeah, I just got the banana." And I'm like,
I got the banana, right. And you're happy.
yeah, and I'm stoked. And so some people will like the research around sympathetic joy is still in progress, but some people seem to argue that we feel sympathetic joy to motivate us as kind of this proximate motivator for us to help someone else. So in the same way that like the pleasure of sex or the pleasure of food is this like hedonic motivator for us to eat food and to like have sex and to like socialize with people, the pleasures of life seem to compel us to do things. If the people we want to help, when they succeed, we feel good, that in turn seems to motivate us to have them succeed.
So
do you know what I mean?
An in-group kind of helper, like having you have sympathy for someone within your own group kind of thing for bonding?
Well, essentially it's like in any case where like my psychology wants me to help someone, whether it's my mother, my kid, my really good friend, my any of my cooperative partners. The argument is that like the pleasure that we feel when they succeed is motivating us to help them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that kind of helps in group dynamics, is what I'm wondering. That the group will work then as a result of people being willing to help one another, or is that off?
Well, I think the argument would be like, what are the circumstances in which in which it's like good for me to help another person?
Right. Yes. Right. So when is that?
So okay. So let's think about that. There are like two very loose ones that we can think about. One is it's good for us to help our family. It's
of
good
course.
It's good for me to help my kids.
Right.
And like there are maybe evolutionary reasons, or there seem to be evolutionary reasons why that's the case.
Right.
But it's also good for me to help people who will help me in turn. People who are good, like social partners who I want to invest in.
The sort of like the reciprocity thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it raises this question of like, who is the ideal cooperative partner? Who is the kind of person who I want to build this reciprocal friendship with?
Right.
And so the ideal reciprocal partners are people who are like good at stuff.
So the protagonists, yeah.
Yeah, people who are like good at stuff and like willing to help you back.
Right.
And they're like, they don't only need to be good at stuff. They can also be like good looking, and we can maybe enjoy like the social benefits that come from being their friend. But they can also be like really just like good at everyday things. They can be strong. They can be courageous. They really value friendship. Like friendship is, or loyalty, or whatever.
Right. Okay. Right.
And so the idea is like the sympathetic plot is presenting this character who is in a way an ideal like friend, an ideal cooperative partner. And it like it has them confront an obstacle, which like makes you interested. You want to know how they overcome it. Also, because you start to represent them as like a potential friend, you also like want them to succeed. And then they overcome it, and they achieve their reward, and it pumps this feeling of sympathetic joy.
Right.
And so like coming back to this idea a second ago, so we want to help our family.
Right.
We want to help people who are good cooperative partners, and we also want to help people who are in need, especially when it's like out of their control.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So like, we want to help people who are in need when it's out of their control, and especially when they're good cooperative partners. So for example, like if I'm trying to think of a person who would just be like the best cooperative partner that I can have.
I don't know, like Superman. I don't know.
Oh, right. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. So
Kal-El.
Yeah, so Superman is like outside, and like needs a place to stay for the night.
Okay.
And he's like, "Does anyone have a place to stay for the night?" He's in need. It's out of his control. I don't know. He had a train ticket, but it got canceled. Like the idea is that I really want to help Superman in this context. Like it's good for me to help Superman,
Right.
because now I'm investing in this relationship, and like he is also kind of in my debt.
Right, because you helped him.
Because I helped him. So the idea is like when someone is like an ideal cooperative partner, they have good skills, they're like willing to help you, and also when they're in need and it's out of their control, then you're super motivated to want to help them.
But what about when that moment happens and you feel good about helping someone? I don't think, oh, and they'll get me back. Like I just think, I'm so nice. Like that's
right. Well, so the idea is like,
is it unconscious?
Yeah, no. The idea is that like the fact that you are investing in a cooperative relationship is out of your conscious control. It's just like
right.
How your mind is designed to reap the benefits of social and cooperative relationships.
Okay.
You weren't consciously doing it. You were just like beholden to the psychology that you're endowed.
I'm like, wow, I only want to get stuff back, I guess. No, but it's all unconscious, right? So I don't specifically, I mean, some people might think, oh, great, they're going to help me. Like some might.
Superman, like, let me help Superman. This is great for me.
Yeah.
Actually, I remember, so when I went to college, there was a celebrity who was there at the same time.
Oh, are you going to say who it is?
It was Emma Watson.
Okay, cool.
So, and I remember like, I remember once Emma Watson walked into a pizza place in which we were, and my friend was like, dude, we need to talk to her. And there's the sense like, we need to go and like, invest in this relationship. We got to like build this relationship with this like famous person.
Yeah, of course.
Which I only mentioned to say like, sometimes it is actually instrumental, our desire to help someone.
Yeah. But did you talk to her?
No.
No, we did not. But like, that's the thing. I've actually thought, okay, I'm going to take a segue here.
Yeah.
I've actually like thought about the celebrity thing. Like how do you organically speak to one of them? Because if you just go up and like, maybe there's someone who's kind enough to do a selfie, maybe that's their philosophy. Like I remember, Kit Harington, who played Jon Snow, he said he would do that because he figured he loves doing the job, and this is the cost to do the selfies with people. So yeah, so there might be some people where you're like, oh, I remember they said they didn't mind this, so I'm gonna do it, But like, if you want to be not an annoying jerk, where you're like, oh, I'm just gonna be one of a bazillion. It's like, how do you like, oh, I dropped my something. Excuse me, kind sir, would you help me? Or whatever. Or you're like, I don't know. Like, oh, like I'm your waitress. That was lucky. I have to talk to you. But there's things where it has to be organic. Otherwise, it's like, oh, I'm just an annoying person that you are like, oh, another one. Anyways, I thought about that.
Your examples were interesting because both of your examples were cases where or where I didn't decide to interact with you. It's more circumstances that force us into this interaction.
Right.
Oh, I just happened to be your waitress. Oh, my wallet just happened to fall at your feet.
Yeah.
I think because the thing that you seem to be implicitly suggesting is that it's annoying when you seem like you want to interact with them because they're a celebrity.
But it's underneath, though, even, right. It's like they don't know that I
know.
Want this.
But it is probably the case that if you were like, oh my God, I dropped my wallet at your feet, Jon Snow, that they would, that it's maybe a little transparent that.
Like for the celebrity thing, you want them to think that it was an accident. But it's on purpose, but it doesn't matter because they don't know. And even though they probably would be able to see through it, like, oh, I dropped this thing in front of you, sorry. But I don't know. Like, if maybe they don't know, and I'll feel better about it. I don't know. But that's the thing about the story, because these are actors. It's usually like, maybe they're not just actors. Maybe there's other famous things that people do that people want to meet others for. But they're directly involved with the storytelling process. That's like maybe all the people who people want to meet are people involved in storytelling processes, right? Like writers, directors, artists. Artists tell a story. I'm just like making up things. I have no idea if this makes sense.
Like athletes.
Does that make sense though?
I think it's more just a product of like how entertainment is structured, such that those people who are the most prestigious, as in like the most people know who they are, also end up being people who are in stories.
You think it's a happens? Like, I feel like it's connected. Like, you don't think so? Like that they're telling stories, so they're like up here in our minds.
Maybe, I wonder. I don't know. I mean, I do think the case that like
I'm telling the expert. No, expert. I know. No, I don't know.
I do think it is the case that like so I think there are two things that might contribute to it.
Okay.
One is like when we see, for example, a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it has an actor or actress or acting person who we have seen before and who we like.
Mm-hmm.
I think we like get a bigger kick out of it. We want to see movies in which like people who
Yeah.
we already know will star.
Yeah.
And so I think because of that, like people who are creating stories are incentivized to put people who are already popular or known inside them, you know?
Okay, I have a question about that, but were you going to continue?
Well, so I think just the consequence, like if you have a world where I get a kick out of seeing someone I already know in a movie, and that ends up like motivating directors, et cetera, to put people I know, then like as that iterates, then you get certain people who will just like be in lots of stuff and like be especially popular.
Okay.
And get this motivation to
Perpetuate it. Okay.
in highly visible things. I'm just kind of freeballing.
Okay. Yeah, this is just unknown territory. We're on a tangent. Okay, why do people like seeing people they know? Going back to that.
You mean in everyday life?
No, in movies. But it kind of is like a larger version of like our little lives. We do like seeing people we know.
So people do not like to see people they know?
No, people do like seeing the same actor or actress in in like another movie, because like, oh, I liked them. Oh, they'll be in this one.
Yeah. Well, why do you think so?
Oh, you're turning it around. You're asking me things. Oh man. Oh shoot. Oh, I am never on the spot, and you just. This is what I do. I'm the host. Okay, why do I think? Okay, maybe because we like familiar things. Because like I know the word familiar literally comes from family, so we think safe. So we kind of like know what's coming from it. We know what's expected from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we like, and again, we're just on tangent, which I enjoy. But I would imagine it's like, you know, you have developed this relationship with this person. They call them parasocial relationships that are one-sided that you have with celebrity figures.
I read about that and I didn't remember the name of it. So it's parasocial?
Right, parasocial relationships.
Okay.
So I think, like, especially when someone is attractive and like the characters they play are sympathetic, then you start to represent the character and also the person playing them in your mind as like a pseudo friend. You want to hang out with them. You think about them sometimes.
Like, I just really think Jennifer Lawrence would like get along with me really well. Like that. Like that's an example.
Well, okay, yeah. So they,
okay.
If like, I think the studies, though, for example, ask people to like list their favorite actors or actresses or acting people, and then they'll ask them to rate them on all of these questions. Do you ever think about like spending time with them? Do you ever like do you think like you and them would really kick it? You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you miss them if you like have just saw a long series and now are no longer watching it?
Yeah.
And on that basis, it seems like people do seem to some extent to to represent these other individuals as like people kind of in their social network. I think it's also the fact that like they also know that they're highly prestigious,
Right.
And so like not only are they people who you're like intrigued by, but they're also like popular people,
Right.
and so on that basis, when you see them again in another movie, you're like, oh heck yeah,
Heck
they're
yeah.
back.
Yeah, okay.
That's just me, guessing.
Okay. Well, I mean,
But
you have a lot of a
there's like quite
background.
a
What?
yeah, on parasocial.
Okay.
No, I was saying that it's kind of guessing, but there is also quite a bit of literature on parasocial relationships.
Yeah, that like I'm sure you've like maybe perused it, right, in the past. But okay, so where are we? Okay, let's get off this segue over to, which is I like the segues, but okay, I do have a question. I think that we've gone over why do all these themes pop up or across the globe. But at the end of the article, you mention that it's sort of taboo to make these unifying theories of these of story.
Right.
Nowadays.
Yeah, so I think in a number of disciplines, like academic disciplines, there is an aversion to like universalizing theories, of theories that make broad claims about patterns, and especially that ground them in human psychology, and especially in like evolved features of human psychology. So I work on another project where we look at patterns in music.
Okay.
Are there patterns in music? And we had this one study that asked, like, do songs that share certain functions, or do songs of the same musical function, such as dance songs, lullabies, healing songs, love songs, whatever, do they, across cultures, share particular features? Do they have common form?
Okay. Do they?
Yeah. Yeah, so they do. Yeah, so dance songs, lullabies, and to some extent healing songs seem like they definitely do. And we did not find strong evidence that love songs did. There was like some suggestive, interesting evidence, but in a follow-up study that we have coming out, it does look like it. Yeah, so like across cultures, these songs seem to share features enough so that like a naive person in India or in the United States can listen to a song from a foreign culture that they've never encountered, and like above randomness, what its function is. But
really? Anyway,
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, sweet. But the broader thing was just that when we published this project, there was quite a backlash from some academics about
really
towards like projects that make these kinds of claims, or that ask these kinds of questions.
Right. So what did they say? Like, what was the backlash? Like, what was the consensus of the backlash?
Yeah. Well,
do you mind talking about this? Is that okay?
No, I don't mind at all.
Oh, okay.
I just don't want to misrepresent what they say or like not remember it clearly.
I know. Okay, but I just read I just refreshed what your article said, so I think that they said that it's like problematic, like like they just said that this is like culturally insensitive or something.
Yes, yeah. So I think there are a number of things. One, I think it's this idea that like by identifying or talking about these patterns, you like trivialize the interesting details that like give cultures their like interesting qualities. Secondly, by like talking about these kinds of patterns, not only do you trivialize like the other features of the beliefs or practices or songs or whatever, you ignore some things that some people will say are very important in thinking about like the form of stories or the form of music, which might be like political forces, or they might be like economic forces, or they might be things about like how a society is dealing with a changing and like volatile political atmosphere. they might also say that in drawing these kinds of parallels or identifying these patterns, another thing that they sometimes say is that you're denying human agency. You're denying like
What?
the fact that individuals have roles in like constructing their cultural products, or you're denying the fact that like individual cultures have or societies have ways of interpreting and remaking the things that they produce. So, for example, like yeah, it might be the case that lullabies show these features, but like in a specific family, a person might like put on death metal to put their child to sleep, or then just like might put on a television. Um, and in making these broad claims, I guess it's pretty similar to this like trivializing details, um, but you're ignoring the roles that individuals might have in remaking or
Right.
remaking these cultural products. And like there are a number of other things they'll say or that they have said, which also include like if you're making claims about universals on the basis of like Western cultural products, you like that's irresponsible. Or
Okay.
yeah,
Why? Why is it irresponsible?
well, I mean that's actually just like scientifically not good. If I am only, for example, looking at Western music and then I say that those are the
Oh,
universal.
well then, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. But I mean, unless you're specifically studying Western music, but you wouldn't universalize it, you would just say this is features and
Right.
you just explain it
Right.
differently, right? So, okay, but why did you say that you disagreed with their criticisms?
Well, I mean, so there's uh, I everything that I just enumerated, I don't think is wrong. Like I definitely acknowledge that. I definitely acknowledge that like stories everywhere might share particular features, but also like individual cultures have different ways that they present those stories, or there are obviously like ways that we subvert the sympathetic plot in some instances.
Right. Oh, tragedy. I wanted to talk to you about that.
Right. So tragedy is a great example.
Right.
Or
But are tragedies found in all cultures as well, though?
I don't know. I don't know if there's been good systematic studies. There have been good systematic studies actually investigating it.
Oh, maybe
They seem.
you could if you wanted.
Sorry.
I said you could if you wanted.
I can't.
Study some tragedies.
In perusing just like folktale collections, it's something that I've had in mind, and I haven't seen them super widely. But there might be some studies. I don't want to say that there haven't been. I just
Okay.
maybe haven't. So,
So, anyways, you were saying so there are differences, but
there are different variation. There are ways that people subvert it, and also like I definitely don't deny that political forces or economic forces, or like the particular cultural context, leads like cultural forms to take like different manifestations.
right.
Uh,
Well, that's why it's amazing that these things are universal because they arose independently.
right, right, yeah. So I just like I guess my thought is like yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of the criticisms, but I don't think our project like denies those, or the projects that I do more generally deny those.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay, I did want to ask you about tragedies though, because like they kind of suck, right? Because you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so I don't want to say okay spoilers for like I won't say exactly what it is, but I watched this movie on the weekend called Jojo Rabbit. Have you heard of it? It's just about a Nazi Germany, a kid in the Hitler Youth who had an imaginary friend who was Hitler. So anyway, it's a comedy. So anyway, but there's some sad parts, and I just am like really sad. Like it made it like left an impact. I'm like all sad now for like the past few days. So like, how does it have the power to like make me sad? First of all, and why? But it seems almost more meaningful because it's sad.
Yeah.
So,
So, like the fact about why it causes you to be sad, or how it has the power to make you sad, I think it's similar to what we were talking about earlier, which is there are potentially like a number of reasons why you're sad, but one of them seems to be that like when you watch a movie, you do build this you develop this parasocial relationship with the characters.
Right.
You're on their side, and if they go through something rough or they die or whatever, you are bummed for them in the same way that you would be for like yeah, exactly. Your second question is a super interesting one, which is like, why make tragedies?
Yeah.
And so I think the thing that you brought up is an important thing, which is like, and I think there are two ways we can think about it, which is this notion of meaning. So one of them is when sometimes like movies and stories are not only about making people feel good. Right. They also like educate, or they can like communicate ideas, or they can make you think secondly about some things, or they can just like be beautifully crafted and you can have an appreciation in a different way. And so it might be trying to do something aside from just like making you feel good in the sympathetic joy way. And it might have some meaning beyond that.
Like teaching you things?
Well, it could be teaching you things. It could just be like it reminds you of something, or it's like raising a question. So for example, let me try to think of an example. Let's say we like see a movie, and it's about how like people we know. Oh my God. Oh yeah. What was this movie?
I don't know.
It was by the same person who made, I think, what's that other movie called Get Out?
Right. Okay, I never saw it, but I know the premise.
Okay.
Oh yeah. That duo. They're a comedy duo, but it's the one guy who made it. Can't remember their names. Key and Peele. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think Peele made this new movie. Us. Oh yeah, Us. Have you seen it?
Oh my gosh, no. We went to see a movie, and like my husband went out like quickly and then came back, and he said that people were like coming out of that movie crying, but like scared. And I was like, I don't want to see that ever. It sounds scary, isn't it?
I guess it's scary.
Isn't it scary? Isn't it like psychological?
It's psychological.
Yeah, I can't. You can just tell me. I don't care. Spoilers. You can just tell me about it.
Well, the interesting thing about that movie, there are obviously a bunch of interesting things about that movie, or not obviously, but there are a bunch of interesting things about that movie. And there's a really great YouTube video that I saw that like goes through the movie. It goes through all like many scenes in the movie and just like talks about how many references there are to other movies. Oh. That all aside,
cool.
The interesting thing about that movie is it tangles the protagonist and the antagonist. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to spoil it. Should I spoil?
I spoil like it? A few people just fast forward.
Okay. Yeah. So actually, like it starts out with this girl who goes. She like gets lost in this like haunted house thing.
Okay, I will never see it. So.
Yeah, and then it cuts to later, and this essentially like her mirror image doppelganger like emerges from this world that exists beneath ours, where we all have.
It's kind of like the Upside Down, like from Stranger Things, a little bit, right?
Potentially, yeah. I'm not familiar with it, but that sounds potentially like.
Sure.
But so everyone has like a doppelganger or like a second version that lives under the ground, like a shadow of them. And this one comes up, and they're like wreaking havoc. But these two figures are confronting each other. This woman and her alter ego doppelganger.
Yeah.
And the movie just recounts how. It's like about these people trying to take over, or trying to like kill people and whatnot. I don't really need to go too deeply into it. Right. But the interesting thing at the end is you find out that the woman who you have been following until this point is actually the doppelganger. So like when that girl went to the haunted house thing in the beginning of the movie, her doppelganger person like
walked out,
switched. Yeah, she essentially like dragged her into the doppelganger world, and then the doppelganger version replaced this girl.
Oh, so you've been rooting for the wrong person.
Yeah, essentially. But there are a number of indications I admittedly didn't know. I knew something was going on. But I only mentioned all of that to say that like at the end of the movie, you are not sure who is the protagonist or who you should be sympathizing with.
Right. That's where things get kind of literally like switched on their heads almost.
Yeah. And I think that works in its favor because I think that makes you just like think more deeply about the themes and topics that are brought up in it.
So would that be considered a tragedy or not really?
Maybe that's not a tragedy. I don't think that's a tragedy.
But it is like not really like the hero wins. So
yeah, to take like a common example or a classic example, like Romeo and Juliet. Oh, and I mentioned this in the Aeon piece. Like Romeo and Juliet ends in this way, and so afterwards, the fact that it ends tragically leads people to think that there is a greater message that's being explored there. Like, is this about how if love is if you are fully passionate, that love is destructive, or is it about how fate will always triumph even when passion is strong?
Right.
Just the fact that it ends with tragedy signals to people, or people take that as an indication that there is a larger message here, that there's a larger meaning.
Is that what tragedy elicits, I guess, in us, that there's something bigger here?
Well, I don't know if it's a general phenomenon, but it's at least the case with like Romeo and Juliet. So the point being that at least in some instances, the fact that an ending is tragic seems to at least indicate to us that there is meaning there. And maybe in some instances it's also necessary for there to be a broader meaning. I'm not sure.
Is there more meaning in tragedies then?
I don't know if I'm qualified.
Okay, well, it just feels like if something comes with a cost, then there's more meaning. That's what it seems like.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow.
Right?
I wonder. That's so, like...
You're welcome.
If there is something negative here, then there must be something to redeem it. There must be something that I'm getting. I could also tell you like a tragic story that you would just be like, that sucked.
That's true. It's not, you're right. It's not a universal. It could be like, oh, and the kid died and like, it wasn't good.
Right. Like, so, and this is another quote that's in the Aeon piece, but Stephen King once wrote in his book on writing, like, no one wants to read a 300-page book and then find out that the main character got eaten by a pig.
Yeah. That feels meaningless, right?
It does feel meaningless. The interesting thing is when we talk about it, I do almost feel like that being a symbol of the meaninglessness of life. Do you know what I mean?
Like it should happen because...
Or almost like when that happens and I walk away from it, I'm like, that book was ultimately about how everything is meaningless.
But we want the meaning. Like we want the tragedy that points to something more.
It seems like that's the case. Yeah, we want the tragedy to point to something more.
Because life is that's what I thought. Maybe the tragedy was in existence because life is tragic because we'll all die. So this is helping us deal?
The tragedy is a means of just...
dealing with your own mortality? Is that right?
I don't know. I have to think that that's probably not what's going on. But that's an interesting...
It's an idea.
Yeah, no.
Because life is suffering, but like there's also good, there's highs and lows, and you know... I did read this somewhere. I don't know where, but it's like practice. If you read a tragedy, you can go through it, the motions and the emotions in a story, and you don't even have to have an actor or an actress because you can just literally read it, and there's no one playing anyone, but you can go through it, and you haven't lost any parents or anything yet, and then you do. Or grandparents or whatever, and then you can kind of be like, well, I remember how I felt when Dumbledore died. though.
You think as a way, so you simulate the emotions.
Yes,
Or
so
you,
like it's a practice. It's like a practice round. So in a sort of like evolutionary like oh we tried, we practiced it. I don't know. What do you think of that?
yeah. So there are, I would say that some of the most popular theories of fiction are these like simulation theories.
Okay.
So there are different forms. Some say that like the value of fiction is that we simulate emotions and we gain empathy. So now I have um, a broader understanding of the kinds of emotions that a human might feel, and so I'm better at empathizing with other people.
Right.
Or other people might say that by simulating going through all of these experiences, like you said, I'm practicing, or I'm learning how to solve those kinds of problems, or I'm like, in a way, like building muscle memory for when I'm in a similar situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I personally
You
am
don't think
skeptical
so?
of some theories, but I should say that like those are pretty popular.
Right.
And yeah, and you know, they have, there's
Well,
like a
because we
bunch
keep
that people,
writing the tragedies. Like they keep on, the tragedies aren't going away, you know?
true. That is true. We do write quite a few tragedies. But if we look at, for example, and this is another thing that I mentioned in the Aeon piece, but like the 20 highest grossing movies of 2019, at least of like when I looked at it, which was, I think, the middle of July
Okay.
or the middle of August. 16 of them were full sympathetic plots.
So the happy
Sympathetic,
ending, basically, like problem solved, rewards at the
yes.
end.
Yeah, 16 of 20. The ones that violated it were Us, which we just talked about, which like tangled protagonist and antagonist. I think the Avengers, because like that's quite a sympathetic ending, but the main character actually dies.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Yeah, sorry.
Everyone should have watched it already.
Yeah, and then I can't remember the other two, but the point is that even when they violate it, it still actually is like either interesting in the way that Us is, or it's like a slight modification, often still making you feel good. So like, although we produce a lot of tragedies, I think they, and this is an empirical question, I think they are quite a minority compared to how many non-tragedies and like, or rather tales that we produce.
But it's the tragedies that really kind of stick with you, though, right? Well, they do with me. They do with me. I'm still sad. Yeah, like.
But like the good stuff also sticks with us.
I guess
like
so,
Harry
but like,
Potter,
yeah, I guess Harry Potter does.
Star Wars. The
no,
kind
but
of thing
people die in Star Wars. Like.
That is true. People do die. But yeah, people die. Yeah, and I guess the first three are kind of interesting. Like, who is the protagonist?
Wait, do you mean the literal first three, like the originals, or like the number 1, 2, 3, like the middle new? The originals?
Yeah. No, I meant episodes 1, 2, and 3. I think Anakin. We don't have to go into this, but
yeah, we're good. Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh no, I could go on this rabbit trail like, forever.
But I think so. I think you point to this more general feature of stories where, by using ideas of fate or destiny, or by suggesting that there is some overall trajectory and that like things are forcing a story to move in such a way, we find it satisfying when they fully embody that trajectory. So like if we take the example of Oedipus, and so that, like that is a tragedy, but I think it feels not as bad as, for example, if Harry Potter were to die, because it is destined from the beginning. Because like there is a prophecy, and then it slowly embodies what that prophecy is. And there's a way in which we, for some reason, feel good when, or maybe not good, maybe good isn't the right word, but we find it satisfying when
they fulfill their destiny, even if it's evil. Well, even with like the numbers 1, 2, and 3 for Star Wars, even though like I wasn't a fan of them, but we all knew that Anakin was going to become Vader, and I mean, we didn't like love the way that was cobbled together, but it happened, and we weren't upset that it happened. We're upset about the way in which it happened. So yeah, so I guess even fulfilling destiny for like a negative, like for becoming a villain or for going in a bad way or a tragedy, we just want, isn't that funny? We don't like, but we believe in like free will and not, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that we find destiny in stories so satisfying.
Is that like an intrinsic human thing? Do you think that we kind of don't mean to, but we just sort of like there is a meaning and purpose and a pathway?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Um, it's interesting that we seem to intuitively think that there's destiny.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how cross-culturally recurrent that is, but that we intuitively think that destiny is a thing, and we find it satisfying in stories. That must be linked. There's something intriguing there going on with our psychology.
Okay, well, you should look into it because I don't know how to look into it. But it's very, I think it's really interesting. Well, even like I'm thinking about in different like religions, like, God has a plan, like that kind of a thing, the idea.
Right.
I don't know if God has a plan in other religions. Like, I'm a Christian, so I know for mine. But yeah, and other, I don't know, are there like in other traditions like a sort of like a plan from the deity or like I guess destiny in the world, like from what you've been studying?
Well, I think there's at least sometimes an idea that that like the world may repeat itself, or that there is like an ultimate end that is destined that we are maybe reenacting. But actually, I don't know how often there is this idea that when like a sad event happens, it is justified or rationalized as being like the intention of the enactment of a broad plan.
Unless there's a prophecy.
Yeah. I mean, there is obviously, like, in a lot of societies, there's prophesying, there's divining, but it often fails, and it's much more of an instrumental thing rather than like this thing about the art of the universe. It's much more like, will it rain tomorrow?
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, and it's like almost about is it more about the ritual than it actually happening, or?
Well, I think it's much more about like, I personally think it's much more about one person really wanting this information and another person presenting what seems like a compelling way to get it.
Right. Okay, well, I feel like we've kind of wandered off. But, which is okay. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to ask you. Is there anything else that you want? We didn't go into the individualistic internal.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't do that. Do you want to do a few like little quick points on that?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. So the way that I end the piece is, or I guess or the way that I almost end the piece, something that I talk about near the end, is this idea that Western stories seem to differ from a lot of the stories that we see around the world. The sympathetic tales that are told in the modern contemporary West differ because they are often about the character not only pursuing some kind of external goal, I want to save my father, I want to find some food or whatever, or I want to get free from some terrible circumstance, but they also have this internal journey where they start off with some kind of internal lack. I am shy, or I don't like myself, or I'm like bad with women, or I'm like awkward. And while they pursue this external goal, they also have this internal journey.
Right. Yes.
And it's something that it seems like we can see in the history of literature. Like, it seems to have popped up a little in the 12th and 13th centuries, and then literature really exploded at the turn of the 19th century and the beginning of the 1800s.
Because of the novel, right? Is that why, or is that just part of it?
I'm I don't know if it's.
I thought you said that in the article. Sorry, then I misread that.
What I said is like at the turn of the 19th century, you see the rise in the coming of age novel.
Okay.
And the coming of age story is just like the classic example of this internal growth.
Right.
Where you start off and you're like deficient in some kind of way, and then over the course of the story you mature.
Right.
You become like a more developed person. And then so that again raises this question of like why are our stories peculiar in that kind of way?
Right.
And the thing that I pointed to in the piece was that like people in the like modern, industrialized, educated, wealthy West seem to really define themselves on the basis of their internal qualities.
Right. Rather than their roles?
Yeah, rather than like the ways in which they socially relate to others.
Right.
And so if you have a person or an audience who defines themselves by their internal qualities, the thing that you can get them the most intrigued by is talking about someone who's trying to like overcome internal obstacles, who's trying to fix themselves in some kind of way.
Right.
And the way that you can maybe produce the most sympathetic joy in this audience who's obsessed with thinking about their internal qualities is to have that person ultimately succeed.
Right.
Is the argument. The argument is that as the West has come to think about as people have come to define themselves on the basis of their internal selves, our stories have reflected that transformation.
Right. Okay. And that kind of really seems to have like continued on throughout today. I think you made a quote about something. I think that you said something along the lines of like, who wants to know about someone who doesn't change in a story?
Oh yeah. There was a quote. There. You look at like modern guides to writing stories or making movies or screenwriting, and you see comments like that, like a story or a movie without internal change is a boring one.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, I think that's it. Is there anything? I mean, I really like this sort of the finding the global similarities, and then also like you said, in the West, this is sort of become prevalent, and so you can kind of see the differences with the similarities. I was gonna ask also, story-wise, if you can see a story about like a different group that you might have trouble sympathizing with or something, does it help you? Does that, after you see a story about them, would you maybe like, I don't know, I'm thinking of like, say, I don't know, in like the Israeli-Palestinian like conflict, if you saw us from another person's perspective, or where there's like conflict or something, if you could see a story from a different perspective, does that kind of help you to have more sympathy for that people group, or is that, am I making it up?
No, that's something that people have argued a bunch, that story and fiction are potent ways of expanding our moral circle. So like the classic example is I think it's Uncle Tom's Cabin, where
right,
you have this tale about like a slave, and it becomes very popular, and it maybe allows people to peer into an experience that they would otherwise trivialize or never think about. And this kind of empathy. That's the argument. I think it's still an idea that like people are thinking about and arguing about. But I do think, barring whether story actually like expands me to have an enduring empathy for this outgroup, story is obviously like a potent way for me to tell you about what someone's experience is like, who lives in a place. And it is a useful way for me to get a perspective on like a problem or an issue that I otherwise would not appreciate. So for example, like I might see I just look out of my window and I see like a homeless person, and let's say I think that they deserve this, and like, you know, we have this meritocratic society and whatever. But in engaging with a story about how someone can maybe end up in those circumstances and how, you know, they might fight to get out of them, or they just like might feel trapped, I can now gain a much richer understanding of that circumstance. So I do think story is definitely like a useful tool for that.
And I guess it can even be turned around the other way. I'm thinking like propaganda wise. You can tell like a bad story and make people like hate another group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Oh, it's so powerful. Okay. Okay, I think that's good. I think we're gonna unless there's anything you wanted to add.
No, I'm good for now.
Did we cover it for now? Okay.
I guess
Thanks for chatting. This is really good.